Today I got a first-hand look at what the word Nazi really means. I'm in Warsaw, Poland for a few days and visited the city with an excellent guide who has a great knowledge of the history of his city. He took us around and explained to us what the Germans, and by association the Nazis, did to his once beautiful city. Buildings before and after, through photos and actually seeing the buildings, were shown to us, and it was explained that the Nazis did everything that they could to bomb the crap out of all these buildings, which then became a project for many, many years, post-war restoration. And Warsaw today is a beautiful city. It has a tremendous amount of character, and the people really understand the meaning of the word freedom, which is what led me to want to make this video. Those of us in the West who were post-war babies, which I am assuming include most of us at this point in history, anyone who was active in World War II, unless you were a child, would be very old by now. None of us really understand what it means to live during a time of such utter carelessness for life and destruction, total destruction. In Warsaw, the poor Poles lived not only through a German repression, but then a subsequent takeover by Russians who were equally brutal, although they didn't base their brutality on religion. It was simply a need to be brutal. And that is a direct result of their political ideology, which is communism, was and still is. And I'm sure if Putin could have his way, would revert back to that. But the people in the West, and I speak as a Canadian, but I know Americans are our brothers, our big brothers to the south, and the Europeans whose canoe is already over the waterfall. We as a nation who have always lived in a free country where there's freedom of the press, freedom to dress as we like, freedom to express ourselves through protest and other means, has always been respected. And now we find ourselves facing these millennials and sometimes older versions of people like Bernie Sanders who are a throwback and should know better to the days when it was thought that everything should be offered for free and all wealth should be redistributed in order to be equitable. And where have we seen that work? Nowhere. And yet history fails to be believed. The one thought I'll leave you with as I close out this video is that the guide, I asked him a question about the young people in Poland, and are they aware of this history to the same degree that the fellows of our age, like this guide, are? And he said, sadly, no, they're not. And if Poland and the Polish people who fought so hard to get out from under the iron fist of communism can be raising a new generation of young people who will soon become the adult leaders of our society and who have forgotten these horrible years and the suffering and the misery of their ancestors, if they are not remembering what happened during the recent past, so we're talking maybe 60, 70 years ago, which is fairly recent in the grand scheme of things, then I fear for the future of these countries, and I fear for the future of us in the West who don't even have that kind of a history to look back on and maybe learn something from. The Nazis tore down statues, sound familiar? Destroyed whole buildings, forbade the publication of books, corralled people into ghettos, mostly in the case of the Nazis because of their religion, they were Jewish, and were hell-bent on taking over the Western society to convert it to their view of how the world should be lived, who should be allowed to live, and they were subjected, the people who lived then, to utter brutality that was viewed as acceptable or totally ignored by those who felt that they had no way to stand and fight against it. We have a way to protect our rights. We should not allow our government to censor the press. We should stand up for the right of the downtrodden, but I don't mean downtrodden as in poor people, because I think we as a society do a fair bit to try to help those who are less privileged than we are, but we should be very, very careful about giving up our rights and allowing our young people to continue down this path to indoctrination, which is what our educational system promotes, and which is going to lead us to a very dark place if we're not able to turn things around. I do have hope that we are turning things around. I see that our country is turning conservative blue a little bit at a time, and come October 21st, I have my fingers double and triple crossed that we will be waving goodbye to the prime minister that has embarrassed our country on the world stage for the last 4 years, and who rose to his position of power solely on the basis of his name and nothing else. And that in itself wouldn't be such a big deal if not for the worries that this prime minister leaves for us to mull over in his ideologically driven agenda. And that's it for today. I'll update you on my trip across some of these anti-globalist countries that I'll be visiting the next few days. Next on my list of countries to see is Budapest, and then Vienna, where at the moment they're having a big political upheaval due to some scandals that were revealed in the Freedom Party of Austria. So I'll have more to report on that when I get there.